Hello, everyone. This is Ellie Dehoney with Research America. Welcome to our Alliance member web meeting this week. Thank you as always for being Alliance members. It's so important to us and to the strength of our organization. And glad to have you joining us today at the beginning of Memorial Day weekend. So before we get started, I just want to direct your attention to the screen for instructions to mute and unmute your lines. Please type your questions into chat at any time, and we'll save questions for the end of Dr. Dzau's presentation. For those of you dialing in by phone, we'll open up the phone lines after the presentation, and you'd hit *6 to unmute your line and ask a question. Our first speaker, he needs no introduction, but I'll do it anyway. Dr. Dzau, who is president of the National Academy of Medicine, the vice chair of the National Science Council, and a globally prominent physician researcher in cardiology. Also, I am thrilled to say, a member of the Research America Board of Directors. Dr. Dzau, we look forward to your comments, and I know you have slides, so I think we have that set up for you now.
That's great. So thank you, everyone, and Alliance members. I truly appreciate the support you give to Research America, being a board member. I think Research America is doing great stuff, and we need to make sure that it continues to do so. I'm asked to talk about COVID-19, what else is new? But I thought I would tell you about what we're doing at National Academies, and then pivot to some of the innovations that I see that's going on that's so important, because the motto of Research America is discovery, innovation, and health. That's what I'm going to talk about. So first, next slide, please. So as you all know, we as the National Academy, Medicine, Science, Medicine, and Engineering, are academies which were chartered in 1863 to advise the nation. So this slide shows you the scope of activity that's going on in National Academies, particularly at the NAM. You see at the very top, advise the nation. Indeed, in our charter, our job is to advise the US government and globally. We've been fortunate enough to be asked by the White House, OSTP, and HHS to form a standing committee to advise them on science-based issues. And so this was a committee we founded that is chaired by my predecessor, Harvey Feinberg, and it's been an amazing committee. This standing committee is working 24/7. Literally for the last couple of months, and you see many of the issues that's being considered with regards to COVID, which has to do with, say, masks, vaccines, testing, crisis standard of care, and others, were all actually a lot of work that we're doing for them, as the White House and the task force is trying to make its own decision. Now, as you know, decisions are very complex, but certainly we're very pleased to be providing the science-based issues for them as they make their decisions. So I'll come back to that in a few minutes. The second you can see between 12 o'clock and 3 o'clock is reliable source of information. We have seen our role to be important in providing reliable source of information, and I'll tell you about the webinar series that we have, the publication, and many others, and working along with Google, trying to make sure we counter misinformation. Third area is broken programs. Our members and many of you have such great ideas that they come to us and say, should we do this or that? So what we've been doing in this third area at 3 o'clock is to take some of these great ideas, either to implement them, as I'll tell you later on as an example, or to help them broker connections between different programs that's going on nationally in order to move some of the great ideas forward. Fourth, of course, is what you guys are doing, creating the work environment. We have gone virtual since mid-March, and we continue to be working at home, creating the right work environment, and I would say that it's going quite well. Fourth area at 6 o'clock is asking all the programs at NAM that works on equity, aging, workforce, as well as healthcare delivery, ethics, etc., to focus on COVID. So we have all our academies response to COVID by creating all these programs together, looking at what is COVID doing to the issue of equity, and many of you, sure, you heard a lot of things about that. How about to the older population? What about to opioid use disorder population? And in addition to that, of course, the issue of workforce burnout, healthcare delivery system, ethics, and technology. We've also engaged our members, as I talked about broken programs. We set out to ask all our members to come up to a database and to respond to whatever, give us good ideas, and we're now working through a member engagement program to advance the initiative. In the global arena, we've been very active, particularly myself, in working in the global arena, particularly looking at equitable access to treatment, drugs, and vaccines. And then, of course, up there in the corner is the very important issue that we're working across all academies, and not just NAM, but across all of NASEM and NRC. Next slide. This slide shows you the kind of work that was done by a standing committee. Unlike what we usually do, which will take us a consent study a year or longer, we actually have put out 11 expert consultations, all of which were done in less than a week, because this is what's really needed in real time when things are moving so quickly. So the question that White House asked us about virus shedding, antibody response, lab testing, face mask, seasonality, how is it being spread? How do you look at standards of care during this crisis? What about stability in service and incubation of the virus? Design for modeling, social distancing, young adults, etc. And these were done literally, as I said, by the expert committee, of which there are about 20. We've divided them into four working groups, and they're putting out evidence-based consultation, White House. We also carry out many telephone consultation, which are in fact directed to their questions. Next slide. On the issue of reliable information, we've been asked by many people, the public, scientists, public health, including Congress and their staff, wanting to know a lot about the facts behind this. So we have, together with APHA, the American Public Health Association, George Benjamin and I have put together this joint webinar on a weekly basis. You can see what we've done. We've taken deep dive, an hour and a half each time, into social distancing, into spread and treatment, standard of care, testing, equity, and we have done 2 with reopening. We have people like Scott Gottlieb and Mark McClellan and experts in various areas to speak. And importantly, this has, on an average, 10,000 registrants and about 8,000 to 10,000 viewers on each. Next slide. And I won't have time to go through many of the things we do, except to say that National Academy is well positioned. Think about where we're going and what we're doing today and where we're going tomorrow. So we have, in fact, a concept paper now ready for action to look at 3 categories: actionable, irreplaceable, and strategic. In the actionable, it's the kind of things I just told you about, things that need to be done right now. In irreplaceable, we're looking at collection of data from what's going on right now. As you open the schools, as you open the community, are we collecting data so that we understand what's going on and we can prepare for a second wave? The strategic, exactly what we're saying, long-term strategies of what the nation must do to prevent this and to recover. Next slide. And what you see here are the examples. Rapid scenario-based analysis of possible and probable futures. Informed response recovery decisions by government, university, business, and of course the Executive Council. So examples like what happens in a second wave to migrant farmer workers or other kind of workers, so to food supplies and regional national economy. What happens if it's a pandemic on the US tourism? What happens second wave to fiscal sustainability and research capacity of research university? What happens to the future of education? And these are many such examples which we're prepared to and working along with funders, Congress, to actually start thinking about now and what's in the future. Next slide. I want to spend a few minutes on innovation because Research America is about innovation and you're about innovation. I've given this talk yesterday to the Council of Competitiveness about we need 21st century tools to fight a 20th century war. And unfortunately, I'm sad to say many of the things that we have right now are old-fashioned, not resilient, not scalable, and that's why we're having so much trouble responding to this. It would be fair to say that our nation have been slow to respond, as other nations which quickly came with containment strategy, like in China, Taiwan, Singapore, South Korea, despite the fact they have the first cases, they have been able to quickly contain, isolate, contact trace, quarantine, and therefore, if you look at China, 1.4 billion population, they have somewhere around 80,000, 90,000 cases with about 4,600 deaths. If you look at our country, you can see what a difference. And I'm not being critical of our country. I think the nature of our country is entrepreneurism, individualism. So it's much harder to get people to all work quickly towards one direction. But we've been successful because of entrepreneurs and individualism. So we have to learn a lot about where we want to be going forward. But what you see here is the point I'm trying to make, that to fight a 21st century war, we need strategy, we need command, we need the right tools. And if you think about the military, they've always had this kind of strategic approach to find ways to incorporate new weapons, armamentarium, and methods of fighting their opponents. So what I want to do is spend a few minutes talking about this section. If you look at the 6 areas I put out, these are the kind of areas that's really in need of innovation. Public health surveillance, testing, interventions, when do we and how do we open the country, healthcare delivery, of course, and new treatments and vaccines. And I won't have a lot of time to speak on testing and mainly because there's so much discussed. Suffice to say, our problems, our current tests are too slow, too expensive, and difficult to scale. And there are many new efforts towards molecular testing, antibody testing, antigen testing under development. All of them suffer, in my opinion, from challenges of technical challenges and also problems of specificity and the sensitivity. So not taking a lot of time to talk about this, I would say that it needs innovation. And from a starting point, back in February, when CDC is the only one that's doing this, that's simply not enough. Now we're open for innovation for the private sector. And of course, recently NIH announced this new program called RADX with $1.5 billion from Congress for particularly on testing, diagnostics. They've been able to open for competition. And this competition will enable a lot of innovators to come in and to see whether they can do technology that's faster. You know, a single drop of blood or swab can do like a pregnancy test. You can read it quickly. And of course, ultimately scale to solve our problem. What I really want to talk about is the other innovation, which is digital. That's really exciting. And it can serve as a supplement to the current methods of testing because it can help you determine who should be tested, where to target the social distancing and what they call non-pharmacologic interventions. Next slide. So digital innovation, surveillance, contact tracing, social distancing, return to work. We're seeing tremendous innovation in each one of this space. In surveillance, apps can detect an outbreak before people showing up at hospitals. For example, at Mass General and King's College, they have an app that allows people to report the symptoms. They've used it now in 2.5 million people. It's quite accurate, actually, in predicting those who truly have infection. So this quickly, they can end up being in healthcare facilities to get help. And MIT has a program called How We Feel, which is done with people on the West Coast, been tried in Israel, UK, and China. Lots of people used it. That only also allows people to self-report, but at the same time being able to connect to the healthcare security information so that you can also look at treatment as well as public health professionals identify new outbreaks and understand how the virus is spreading. Contact tracing. You all know that this is in fact the best important practice, the best public health practice in early outbreaks, but it's labor intensive. It relies on people, relies on telephone, relies on people's memory. And so here's where digital tool can really be helpful. And internationally, in China, South Korea, they've already done this. As you know, they can, using iPhone, they can report the data and locate cases and trace contacts. South Korea has released detailed information on infected individuals, including their recent movements, and it's viewable through a private app. Now, you can argue this is a privacy issue, but it works. And in Apple and Google are trying to create a contact tracing app using Bluetooth technology, alert people who've been in proximity to someone who has tested positive for COVID-19, and also retroactively can use the data for exposures. And MIT has a private automatic contact tracing team that also develops such a system, and a number of states are also using this approach. Social distancing. You know, Google said they've been able to track foot traffic at the public parks in New York. And once you did social distancing, the traffic went down by about 45%. When they look at other countries like Italy and Spain, as Chris Murray told me recently, the traffic went down by 90-some%. Again, as it reflects our country and the kind of, energy that we have sometimes in trying to be contained, if you will. And of course, at the UK, NHS is having a app that allows you to say you are now outside too long or you're getting too close to somebody, the 6 feet distance, if you will. So lots of great idea. Finally, I want to tell you about returning to work. So Verily is developing an algorithm to look at evidence-based decision rules to look at what circumstances people going to work. And importantly, it's recognizing that not all work is the same work environment between construction worker, between restaurants, between hospitals. So they want to create an algorithm that fits to the different level, the types of businesses. They're now partnering with us at NAM using scientific approach to validate the proposed algorithm, to look at what's the best way to implement the algorithm, particularly looking at different types of business, and to look at long-term refinement algorithm, getting employees involved as well. We're very happy to be involved with it. Next slide. Next slide. So, future. I think that this innovation will be great for future, because if you can imagine, how do we find an outbreak? Well, frontline clinicians, healthcare workers will see its case and say, that's a little unusual. This pneumonia is a little unusual. Don't know what to do with it. They struggle with making diagnosis. Eventually they say, let's report. They report up, and then you begin to find number of cases. Then public health became aware of this. They then send people to try to understand the case, diagnose the case, and so on and so forth. Imagine that you can have AI, that clinicians will see the patient using machine learning, that an unusual case pop up. This case unusual will be immediately identified through AI and reported up automatically by automatic reporting. I think that's the way to quickly detect and be aware of cases. This is where I think that predictive analysis is going to be so important. Using data, statistical algorithm, machine learning, you can actually identify likelihood of future outcomes to say forecast the next outbreak. And indeed, there are actually technologies out there. Health Map, for example, use a combination of artificial intelligence data mining to spot disease outbreaks. And then they isolate the specific areas, create colored dots to show where they are, and sound an early alarm. Blue Dot, a Toronto company, actually uses not only that, but they also take airline information so that you can see if it started Wuhan, they know where the Wuhan citizens went to and can begin to early be alert and look out for the potential spread of diseases. The important thing I believe is we need a national weather forecast system. We don't have the technology yet, but we should be having one, because if we can forecast weather, why can't we forecast infectious outbreaks? So I'm writing an op-ed editorial on this whole idea of the need for something like this for the future. Next slide. Now, many of you are in the healthcare delivery area and you know about the innovations. You're now using tremendous amount of telehealth visits. There are apps that can connect patients to the system to report symptoms and problems. I think what's innovative about this, of course, is the ability to adapt regulation, lower the bar, allow cross-state licensure, and lower the bar for payment. And so this is going to be quite interesting as we recover from COVID, how this will change the way we do things. Remote monitoring, robotics to transport medical supplies, to use them to disinfect healthcare facilities rather than people. Drones has already been deployed in Africa to deliver medical supplies, sharing of knowledge so that people know very early what are the facts, etc., and of course data and analytics. Next slide. I'm going to end by talking about vaccine because we do know that unless we get natural immunity, which is not likely to happen, we will need a vaccine to terminate this SARS-CoV-2. It's still within the community and it's not going to go away. So innovation vaccine has allowed us to move very quickly towards vaccine candidates. Here I've listed the platforms: nucleic acid platform, recombinant protein, peptide base, nanoparticle, and viral vector like adenovirus, like the Oxford vaccine is doing. And there are 174 now vaccine candidates, 10 in clinical trials, 2 in phase 2. So it is moving much faster. The bottleneck, as you can imagine, is clinical trials, but also eventually manufacturing. Because if you don't have the supply, what's the point of having a positive vaccine? So a lot of work's been put in, including myself, working on the whole idea of getting companies being willing to risk manufacturing, getting things ready before we even know the trials are positive, betting on a lot of different vaccines, and also importantly, being able to have enough capacity that people to agree on. And there lies the importance of global coordination. Because if you're not coordinated, everybody would compete with each other. If you're coordinated, then we can possibly guarantee universal access. I'd like to talk about that for my last 2 slides. Next slide. So in the United States, as you all know, NIH has a public-private partnership called ACTIVE. This is a very important partnership that allows the researchers to come together, public and private, to work on R&D and begin to think about the issues related to also supply chain, manufacturing, etc. And that is going on really well. And BARDA is out there trying to work with many companies in this. Now, this is quite exciting for us, but I think there's certainly concern that US, this is warp speed, is now locking up lots of different companies, etc. So a global initiative has been launched recently. It's called ACT Accelerator. This ACT Accelerator is really a combination of effort between a large number of people, G20 countries, WHO, Gates Foundation, Wellcome Trust, and I've been playing a very big role on this. As you can see, this idea is to bring countries together to work in solidarity. And in so doing, there will be a hub coordination by WHO, and there are 3 pillars, as you can see: vaccine, diagnostic, and therapeutics. And the idea would be that eventually people who work in this arena will be able to agree on some approach towards manufacturing in coordination, and also the ability to distribute vaccines in an equitable manner, because the small, poor countries and the smaller countries will be locked out if all the big countries tie up all the vaccine manufacturers and the producers. So this idea would be working out a formula so you guarantee, every country is guaranteed a percent of a population being vaccinated. The healthcare workers, the elderly, the vulnerable population, and then over time, with more than billions of doses, then everybody will be vaccinated. Next slide. So the excitement on this latter project is my involvement with initiating this pledge that has now raised over $10 billion. In one day, we raised $8 billion, and now it's still ongoing rolling pledge over $10 billion. I went to my friend, this is the work from GPMB, which is the Global Prevention Monitoring Board that I'm on. We called for $8 billion that Chris Chermy Farrar, Chris Elias, many others are on. And then we started asking World Bank and others to help. And my good friend, the president of European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, stepped in and said, I will host a pledge conference. You can see on May the 4th, we had this conference. Macron, Merkel, Boris Johnson, Abe were all on this call, and Melinda Gates and I had the privilege of being part of this, and we have raised that much money. The money will be helping this global initiative to move forward. My last slide, please. So my last slide tells you that, of course, National Academy is also a global organization. We're working not only looking at the issues, what we need to study to prepare US in the future, we also have done previous work, as shown this slide. After Ebola outbreak, we did the important report on global health risk framework, which have actually changed a lot of things. We're now prepared to do another one, looking at an independent assessment of the global and local preparedness and response, collective action and accountability of good governance, responsibility decision-making, and also looking at, of course, the issue I talked about, how to have equity throughout the globe. We're also looking at, hope to look at the broader impact of pandemic in disruption of essential services. Many people are not getting vaccines and others, and economic impact of the pandemic, misinformation, innovation, and public-private partnership. So thank you. Ellie's getting nervous, so I'm stopping here.
No, I just wanted to ask, can we hold you for until 1:35 so we can ask a couple of questions? Do you have time for us?
Yes, no problem.
Perfect. I was going to start by commending you for the rapid response consensus on those key variables in 1 week, which talks about all the science that went before it and how quickly you turned it around. But then you bring up this $11 billion, $9 billion. That is amazing. Thank you from the world for that. And I just want to ask one quick question. You mentioned that you've been asked, one of the projects you're working on is in a second wave, would the infrastructure be prepared, how to prepare it? Are you also looking at the impact of the research and health infrastructure from the first wave and how eroded it may or may not be and what to do about that?
Oh, very much so. I mean, I think the challenge right now is we're in the midst of all this stuff. And if you look at research impact, as you all know, first of all, most research laboratories of most universities research are closed, and they just begin to let people back in. Research laboratory, I still run a research lab at Duke. I've been closed for, about almost 2 months that we can't get into lab. So the impact, as you can imagine, is huge with regards to ongoing laboratories, cell cultures, animal colonies, you name it. So I think coming back is going to be a major issue. Also in coming back, certainly at Duke, we are going slowly by allowing like shift work and only one person or two people in the lab at a great distance. I think the impact is going to be huge. The issue is going to be how do we recover from this? And I know that Kevin Drugemeyer has spoken to the three presidents at NASEM to talk about how to evaluate this. He's actually doing a lot of evaluation, looking at the implication. But also the question is this going to change when we do science? Have we learned something from this experience that maybe the infrastructure support and the type maybe have to be changed? Certainly, we are talking a lot about reducing the burden of scientists with regards to regulatory burden, etc. Now I think we've suddenly realized how much everybody needs to do. So I think your question is so spot on. I don't know the answer, but we're going to work on it.
That's wonderful. And I'd like to turn to Terry because I think a couple of questions came in through the chat function. Terry?
Yes, indeed. So I have one question here. What advice do you have for us, Dr. Dzau, to help us individually message to our fellow citizens about the need for support of biomedical research? The questioner adds, is based on the disappointing fact that scientific input is being seen as disruptive in our society, not aligned with the benefit.
Well, I think I just saw some data that came out on a survey that says that science is now more trusted because of COVID, but unfortunately it's one party than the other. So what you're saying is quite true. Are we now being pushed into a political arena? I'm very proud of the scientists, Tony Fauci, others, to stick with science, because at the end of the day, I think science will prevail and science will prove to be the solution to our current challenges. So I understand your concern. We need to work very hard on this.
Great. And one other question, could you share a little more detail about the nature of any mental health research you're contemplating?
Oh, yes, big time. We actually just came off from this morning and all of yesterday, a symposium followed by a steering committee looking at this issue. First of all, if you think about the work we're doing, mental health as a whole, the clinicians, I wrote a Perspective New England Journal of Medicine just last week released that talked about need for a national response because they're getting burnout and suicide. And we also look at the substance use disorder group that's actually forgotten, stigma, no access to treatment. Big problem. I work with an organization called One Mind. We have a big project called Healthy Brain Global Initiative. In fact, we've written about the big concern of mental health as what we call the next wave, if you will, after the COVID, because we're going to see a surge in mental health problems across the world. And of course, the whole idea is your question, what to do about this. Clearly, we need to get our act together to address this. Thank you.
Any other questions, Jen? We have exactly 2 minutes of Victor's time.
Yes, another question, and you addressed this a little bit. Where can research best support the efforts of frontline healthcare workers?
First of all, making sure that we have, as you saw in my New England Journal, the frontline workers, that their well-being is so important, that we need to make sure that people understand, again, if you don't support them, patients will not be properly cared for. But also the idea of having incident command centers, which they make decisions every day on the outbreak. But what about having the wellness officer being part of the team, look at, are we taking care of the workers? We talk about the need to have a national strategy to look at this. After 9/11, the responders called heroes, Congress passed a national act to actually take care of their physical and mental health. We asked for that as well, and to track the science piece about how they're doing in the long run and being able to do the right thing in the future on an ongoing basis.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Victor. This was just a terrific, extraordinary presentation. We're so grateful to you and for all you're doing for all of us. Thank you.
I feel privileged to be part of you, Research America. Thank you very much.